Okay, good morning, everyone. Hi, this is Diane Domage with SCS Global Services, and we're here to start our webinar for GlobalG.A.P. And I think we have a good number of folks here, and more will be joining us soon. As I had been putting in the chat box, I just wanted to let you know if you have any questions to go ahead and type them in. And if they're something we can work into the presentation and talk as we go, we will do that. Or we may wait until after a reasonable break time so we can answer your questions either with everyone, or if it makes sense, privately to you, either online here or afterwards. So just to get going then, I'd like to say our presentation today is on our expanded solutions for your operations. And as a GlobalG.A.P. provider, we're happy to be we invited Jonathan Needham, who's the Vice President of Operations for GlobalG.A.P. North America. And we also have our technical manager for GlobalG.A.P. here at SCS Food Safety Services, David Hernick. So I will just let you know also, as a training manager, I have been working providing GlobalG.A.P. Trainings in person as well as online for the past 3 years. And we have some coming up, and you can take a look at our website, but in January we're going to be in Salinas at the end of the month, and in February in Kingston, New York, and in March in Visalia, and in May, in the beginning of May, 1st and 2nd, back in Salinas after everybody returns from Yuma for those folks. So today's outline, we are going to cover some basic background about food safety relating to FSMA and the Global Food Safety Initiative, GFSI. And then we'll take a closer look at GlobalG.A.P. and we'll look at some expanded options, some new things that we're going to share with you today about our GlobalG.A.P. certification process. SCS is a food industry certification leader. We have been around for about 27 years, headquartered here in Emeryville, California, and we have satellite offices with our various programs around the world. We've been in food safety since the beginning, and we also have been offering sustainability services and quality services in our testing division. We cover the GFSI programs, SQF, BRC, GlobalG.A.P., and also your basic GAP and GMP audits, including the harmonized standard. We also have a variety of other services like Sustainably Grown, which is becoming more popular, Fair Trade USA, Marine Stewardship Council, MSC, and some others, as well as USDA Organic, pesticide residue free, and antioxidant superfood, and flavor rich. We are a third-party certifier. We have provided more than 1,000 certificates in 2012 alone. So I'd like to just do a little review about the background that we're working in today's industry. We have currently food safety requirements in the United States and Canada. The U.S. FDA and Canada Health and Welfare require GAP plus GMP for produce operations. HACCP may also be required depending on the risk level. And retailers and government agencies really view third-party auditing as the best method for verifying successful implementation for prevention and control measures. And testing is the validation process. That's an important component. You all may be aware of the U.S. Services that have governed us for many years. We have the FSIS, which is Department of Ag, and they have jurisdiction over the meat, poultry, and processed eggs, whereas the FDA has the jurisdiction over fresh produce and seafood. So we've seen FSMA coming out under the FDA. And these responsibilities that they cover are regulatory, industry guidance, and surveillance and outreach. And both of them are mandating HACCP for selected products under their respective jurisdictions. The Food Safety Modernization Act came into law in 2011, and it's rather major and is still an ongoing process. The aim is to ensure that the U.S. food supply is safe by shifting the focus from responding to contamination to preventing it. I think what we all know is that we're currently undergoing public comment. It's been extended a number of times, and we all are very much in line with trying to keep up with the produce safety rule and the preventative controls rule. So I would actually defer to Jonathan. Jonathan, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Diane.
Thanks, Jonathan. I'd just like to see if you could maybe share a little bit about how GlobalG.A.P has, responded to the FSMA regulations.
Yes, well, it's still a work in progress, and good morning, everyone, by the way. Pleased to be with you today. At this point, we have submitted commentary to the government for the first and second rules, the produce rule and the preventative controls. The commentary from the third and fourth, the foreign supplier verification, and the accredited certification rules were pushed back until January. So we're still working on our comments for that. But in general, I would say that we're very much in line with the guidance produced by United Fresh and have submitted commentary accordingly. I think it's going to be a while before things play out. We still have 2 comments due, then the processing time, and then obviously we'll see what's revised, never mind the time for implementation and budget allocation for enforcement. But obviously this is a sea change in agriculture, the most important in our country since the 1930s, and these changes will probably be with us for our lives and beyond. So it's very important that we all contribute to the debate and get our comments heard. As far as the individual rules go, I think of the 4, what will impact our business and our system mostly will be the foreign supplier verification. There are some significant changes there, with all importers into the U.S. being required to get a global unique ID assigned by the federal U.S. government. We will add a capacity to our database to store this number along with our current GGN number. And we also think that our chain of custody standards, which provides additional traceability segregation safeguards down the supply chain, will be very relevant in the FSMA era. So that's our main commentary at this point, but we will obviously keep abreast on this and make any required changes.
Okay. Well, thank you. And then also just to give a little bit more background, you know probably about the GFSI umbrella of sorts is the benchmarking program that was launched in 2000 in Europe as a buyer-driven initiative. A lot of private label food companies were wanting the retailers really wanted to protect their private brands. So we have Walmart, Safeway, and Raley's, and a lot of the retailers have been asking their suppliers to be GFSI compliant, and that is being accepted under their programs such as GlobalG.A.P and SQF and FSSC 22000 and BRC that are all under this umbrella of the harmonized food safety standard umbrella that is what GFSI represents. It's a benchmarking system. It's not a standard in itself. And so now we're going to move into GlobalG.A.P standards and benefits, and I'll be turning this over to Jonathan, and also David Hernick will be chiming in as needed, and if you have questions, I'll be trying to respond to them on the chat.
Thank you, Diane. Welcome, everyone. My name is Jonathan Needham. I'm the Vice President of Operations with GlobalG.A.P North America. On behalf of our office and my colleague, Thomas Fenimore, we appreciate your attending today and appreciate SCS is hosting this event. I've looked through the roster, and I believe I know a fair number of you, but it's a pleasure to meet the ones I don't. I'd like to thank Linda Dwyer and Tony Roberts with Costco for being here, as well as Kara Gherkin and Kelly Abbott with ICS, and also say hello to Ms. Moyers. If you have any questions, let me give you in advance my email address. It's my last name, Needham, at GlobalG.A.P, GlobalG.A.P.org. If you have any questions, you can also let Diane know or send a text message. I'm not a technical expert or a scientist, but I will be happy to address your questions as well as I can during this presentation, and we'll be sure to follow up with anything you submit via email. So GlobalG.A.P began in the late 1990s in Europe as a response to the mad cow disease outbreak in the UK. And its roots as a stakeholder-driven industry-wide response to that outbreak are very much still in place in the organization today. We initially were called Europe.G.A.P, not GlobalG.A.P. That name change went through in the mid-2000s. And we initially were a response to basically try to develop food safety controls initially in the context of the livestock issue with the mad cow disease that went beyond those provided at a regulatory government level, which were obviously lacking in the case of the UK mad cow disease outbreak. We expanded from there into Western Europe, and though we've maintained livestock to this day, and it's our second biggest scope, historically, overwhelmingly, we're focused on crops. And within the crop space, most particular produce or fruit and veg. About 90% of our certifications globally are in the produce, fruit, and veg space, but we also cover 4 other what we call sub-scopes of crops, as well as 3 scopes of aquaculture, including fresh and seawater fish farming, as well as about 5 scopes of livestock or animal husbandry. We are the largest private sector GAP standards in the world. We have certification bodies numbering 140 around the globe, linked to 33 accreditation bodies. We work with a series of 140 certification bodies like SCS around the world, who employ collectively around 1,400 inspectors. We cover about 400 products or commodities, and we work with 375 different member organizations. As you can see, we have a very strong position in Europe. We're growing quickly in America and around the world, particularly in Asia and the aquaculture space in Southeast Asia. Total produced under certification in 120 countries as of the last data was 135,000. So we're very much a stakeholder-driven, membership-based, consensus-oriented company. We are, in fact, through our parent company, a nonprofit in basis, and we're very much focused on food safety. That is our mission, along with sustainability and the other criteria groups, more than we look at profit issues. So we're very much a mission-driven organization. We have 3 types of members: retail and food service. You can see some of the more recognizable worldwide companies here. The second category are producers and suppliers. So this would be all manner of farmers or people involved in the supply process. And the third category, which is on the screen here, is associate members. So that would include certification bodies like SCS. It would include consultants, our PharmaSure network, companies involved in laboratory services, related industry, etc. Being stakeholder-based, we very much are involved in having the governance work at a stakeholder level. So this is just a brief overview of how the organization is run. We have a board of advisors at the top, and that is drawn from our members. It is composed of 50% retail representatives and 50% producer or supplier representatives. So at the most fundamental level, we try to be very balanced in our approach. We have a series of committees and working groups which are involved in the process. The so-called secretariat in the middle is actually the working administrative organization of GlobalG.A.P in Europe and GlobalG.A.P North America here and in Canada. We have a series of so-called committees involved in the process. If you look at the bottom here, technical committees, there's 1 technical committee for each major scope: crops, livestock, aquaculture. We then have stakeholder committees, or SHCs, for the cutting-edge issues we're working on. We're very much always at the vanguard of food safety, looking at new issues. Some recent developments there include our GRASP add-on, which provides additional worker welfare. We now have an animal welfare add-on. We're also implementing a responsible water usage guideline, etc. And then we have national technical working groups. And these exist throughout the world, not in all markets, but in many countries, I believe about 35. And the goal of technical working groups at the national level is basically to optimally implement and interpret our standards to take into account local market conditions, regulatory issues, language challenges, etc. So these all interface together on an ongoing basis, and this is the basic governance structure of the company. This is an overview of our standards matrix. Excuse me. What we have in the middle in the main the main box is a diagram that attempts to capture all the main standards on one piece of paper, basically. So what I've done here is highlight with the yellow box our flagship standard, which is called Integrated Farm Assurance, or IFA. So it's a modular approach, and it's got a foundation which is shared by all three main scopes. So that's the all farm base, which is general governance and general farm issues. It then has the crop space, the CB. That in turn has subscopes, fruit and veg, combinable crops, better known in the U.S. as row crops or grains, green coffee, tea, and flowers. Within livestock, we have the ruminant subbase, and then we cover dairy, cattle, sheep, calf, young beef, pigs, poultry, turkey, and finally the aquaculture module, which itself covers fin, fish, crustaceans, and mollusks. Within the IFA space, if you will, our second main standard in this market, Produce Safety Standard, PSS, is a subset. So in essence, PSS is IFA limited to the scope of crops with the subscope of fruit and veg, and then on the control point side, it has the all farm base, crop base, and fruit and veg base of IFA that relate to food safety and traceability. The boxes on the perimeter at the left, right, bottom, and top are our niche standards. So we have plant propagation material, chain of custody on the far right, livestock transport in the medium right. At the bottom, we have compound feed manufacturing, and then we have some of our add-ons like grass on the far left. So this is just a basic overview of the standard structure. This diagram here focuses on our pre-farm gate standards, which are our principal market offering to the USA and Canada. So we have a multi-tiered approach. Our flagship standard, IFA, at the top is the most comprehensive. So as you can see from here, it covers all the scopes and all the subscopes. On the criterion level, it covers all five. So that includes food safety, food traceability / segregation, animal welfare, human worker operational health and safety, and environmental sustainability, biodiversity, and protection. So it's the comprehensive flagship, as you can see here. PSS, as I mentioned, is basically IFA limited to fruit and veg on the commodity side, and then on the criteria, it includes the food safety and traceability, but not the more progressive sustainability, animal welfare, human worker concerns. The first two are fully third-party accredited certifications, and they are at the GFSI recognition level. They're both recognized by GFSI. And at the bottom here, we have our starter standard. So the approach we've taken in the U.S. is that our PFA standard is based upon our international standard called GlobalG.A.P, and that's written all lowercase to contrast with GlobalG.A.P uppercase. And basically, PFA or GlobalG.A.P is designed to be a two-step process to get a producer into the procedure to gradually work up to a full certification. So it's a third-party, non-accredited assessment, but it's not a certificate. And like PSS, it's limited to only the fruit and veg subscope as far as the product choices, and includes entry-level food safety only. So this is an overview of the three pre-farm gate standards. It's a bit small on the screen here, but basically IFA is the comprehensive flagship. It includes all the scopes and subscopes, all the criteria types. It also has a series of add-ons, and PSS, in contrast, as I explained, is just a subset of that with a built-in upgrade path, so you can quite easily move from PSS to IFA. And then on the right, we have PFA. PFA has the two sub-levels, covers basic food safety. It also has an upgrade path towards PSS or IFA as the producer over time is ready to move up, if you will. On the market viability, IFA is the international gold standard in the import-export market. It's the best choice to make if you're exporting outside the U.S. and beyond Canada to the rest of the world. It's the expectation globally, and also the dominant domestic standard in most major markets outside of Europe. On the market viability front, PSS has got strong recognition in the U.S. now, including Costco and Walmart. It's also viable in Canada, and we hope to offer PSS in Mexico soon. PFA, in contrast, is designed at the foundation level for local and regional markets. It does have limited USA, Canada level major retailer support. That's principally for the lower risk product groups that some retailers implement in their requirements. One thing I want to address here briefly is the harmonization alignment. We've been very involved with the Produce Gaps Harmonization Initiative since its beginnings in 2010. As most of you likely know, the goal there was to make some sense out of an overabundance of options and standards in the market. There was a very common problem of what's called audit fatigue. So beginning in 2010, United Fresh pulled together about 80 different standards and members throughout the industry under the guidance of the Produce Gaps Harmonization Initiative. And the basic goal there was to pare things down to acceptable minimum to find a common ground or fundamental checklist that could be used by most parties. So we worked with that throughout that process. The harmonized standard checklists were formalized in 2011. There's a pre-farm gate, formerly known as the field operations and harvesting, and then there's the post-farm gate. And we were the first private sector standards organization to formally align our standards with the harmonized checklists. The harmonized checklists on their own are just checklists. They're not full-fledged standards. They lack a formalized, quantitative-based audit scheme, scoring system, a governance framework, etc. So what we did was to align initially our IFA and PSS standards, and now also our PFA with the harmonized. And I'll go through that a bit later in the presentation. So this is a basic overview of the standard control points and benefits, if you will. As I mentioned, it's a transparent, consensus-oriented, stakeholder-driven process with broad membership representation. Our flagship IFA covers food safety very comprehensively. It covers food traceability and segregation in the context of what we call parallel production ownership. That is to say, with parallel production, if a farmer, let's say, has one field of tomatoes they have separated and one crop they do not have certified, those have to be kept distinct. Parallel ownership would be if a farmer purchases a product from a different location and brings that into his system, for example, to meet a retailer demand for shipping requirements. So those are traceability segregation concerns. We also cover worker operational health and safety. This covers both workers and subcontractors. The simplest way to explain this is to think that it's an extension and going beyond the federal OSHA requirements as far as workplace safety. IFA, being progressive and comprehensive, also covers protection for the environment, including biodiversity. We also involve a lot of points looking at soil use records, energy concerns, and plant production product storage. Just a quick overview on IFA. As far as some of the industry technical terms, IFA as well as PSS and PFA both cover IPM, ICM, QMS, HACCP, and they also cover produce handling. With the GlobalG.A.P system, we are very firmly a pre-farm gate standard system. So we cover up to the farm gate, and we can also cover on-farm pack houses for produce handling. What we do not cover are independent pack houses, and we don't do anything in the processing space. So here's an overview of some benefits of IFA and PSS. The main focus of our standard is to train farmers and help them optimize their production process. The products are certified, but we're really working on, at the core, is getting the procedures and processes in place. So the main goal is to limit risk, minimize potential for food safety incidents, recalls, as well as obviously worker accidents, animal health, environmental protection. The goal really is to protect your brand, the retailers you supply to, and your consumers. This is the main value proposition for the producers or farmers. Increasingly in today's market, having GFSI certification with national retailers is a given, and increasingly IFA and PSS are being requested because of their comprehensive protection and integrity system for especially higher risk commodity products that are more prone to issues. Another benefit of our system is that it gives producers greater access to domestic and international markets. This is especially relevant for smaller producers and customers in the third world, for example, where they are often not able at all to access international markets without achieving the expected international standards for certification. And IFA, being the most recognized around the world, is the passport to global agriculture. Our standards are very flexible and work with farms of all sizes. We have farms ranging literally from a fraction of an acre to tens of thousands. So very flexible system, and 400 different commodities are covered. We also have the world's leading integrity system for a food safety standards network. We have a special program called CIPRO. And what this does, beyond all the fundamental requirements that a certification body has to meet, including being ISO 65 or equivalent certified, having to have each and every one of their staff qualified to our rigorous standards, and have an ongoing training program to keep them current year after year. Beyond all those controls and accreditation body oversight, for example, and in the U.S., we also have an internal system of checks and balances, which is the CIPRO program. So basically, we spot check the works of CBs around the world throughout the year. Basically, we have special high-level assessors who go on site, and they do two different functions. One is that they will double-check the work of a CB by essentially reassessing a farm audit at the ranch level or the packhouse level. The other type of CIPRO operation is to go into a certification body's operations or administrative offices and review their documentation and procedures internally. Some more practical benefits of our system beyond the ones mentioned above is that when implemented thoroughly, they really can make a great difference in efficiency, cost savings, management efficiencies on the farm as far as staffing, documentation, procedures, and also ensure greater regulatory compliance with local, state, national, international laws. Another important aspect of being GlobalG.A.P certified is this communicates to the market the farmer's commitment to food safety, sustainability, and other important aspects of the broader farm certification assurance process. Again, we are GFSI recognized with IFA and PSS, and we're aligned with the Harmonized Standards Checklist in the USA. This is just a quick screenshot for you of the GFSI website recognition page showing GlobalG.A.P's recognition for PSS and IFA in the fruit and veg space for food safety. One of the more important aspects of our system is that we have one of the world's leading private sector databases. It is used to store all the critical information for 135,000 certifications around the planet. We have a global 24/7 accessible website, as well as several mobile apps for handhelds. What you can see here is a quick shot of one of our apps on an iPhone, I believe, and then in the upper right, we actually have some packaging. Being a business-to-business label, we don't allow our logo or name on consumer-level packaging, but we can have the GGN number, and that is the number you see under the little zoom-in feature there. So basically, every producer is assigned a unique GS1 system-compliant 13-digit tracking number called a GGN, a GlobalG.A.P number. And anybody can go to our website around the clock, around the world, and search for a producer by their name or location or their GGN and pull up their certification status. And then based upon the privacy controls they've set, they can also see their contact information, and they can see the individual products they have certified. So this is a very powerful tool, especially for retailers who want to verify their suppliers' certification status and details, but also can be useful for consumer-level lookups. We offer this free public search on our website and on a one-by-one basis. That is to say, you enter a single search query one at a time. We also offer, as a free service to our member, an optional paid service to retailers and suppliers, our bookmarking services. And basically what this does is allow you to save a series of your producer's numbers and organize them by whatever method you like to more efficiently manage your certification lookups. It basically takes out the need to look up things one by one. It's much more efficient, and it can also provide some search analysis tools. So very useful service for retailers and major distributors alike. This is a screenshot of our actual website, which you can pull up yourself with the web browser. So here we have a sample query. which shows at the upper left the GGN number. We then have the producer's name, their contact information. It shows the certification body who certified them. The scheme indicates the standard to which they were certified. You can also generate on the fly a PDF-based certificate through our website or HTML version. And then at the bottom, we have the details showing the products or commodities, their certificate number, their status, and some various things like options we have, etc. The upper right is a little zoom in on what you see when you click on that button there. What we launched in the U.S. about 2 years ago was produce safety standards. Basically, internationally, we had principally marketed in the pre-farm gate space our integrated farm assurance standard, which is a high-end solution, very thorough, very comprehensive. And on the low range, we had our local GA.P program, which in the U.S. and Canada is called PFA. What we found we needed in the U.S. market that we hadn't encountered before was a happy medium, if you will, because we had producers and retailers who wanted GFSI level certified accredited food safety, but didn't want the more progressive control points like worker safety, animal welfare, and environmental protection. So that was the reason we created PSS. So it's been in the market for 2 years now. It's a very good solution for suppliers in the U.S. who are delivering to retailers within the U.S. or Canada, but not internationally. If that were the case, IFA would be the way to go. There's also cases of suppliers who may want to use this for other reasons, but that's the main usage model, if you will. If you want to cover food safety and traceability, but not the other comprehensive control points, and you're just shipping within this market, it's a great solution, and it's got a built-in upgrade path for IFA, so it's very flexible. So we're pleased to have this in the U.S. market now the past 2 years, and SCS is one of the CBs that is offering this to farmers. This is what I wanted to return to from before. This is an attempt to simply explain the nature of the alignment with the harmonized standards. So GlobalG.A.P's governance is based on a 4-part general regulation, which include all the main rules at a fundamental level. And then we have what we call CPCCs, or control points and compliance criteria, which are the actual rule sets for the different standards. And there's also the checklists, which are simply audit field use friendly versions of the CPCCs. But in many countries, as I mentioned, we have these technical working groups, and they produce what's called NIGLs, or National Interpretation Guidelines. And again, the goal there is to optimize the standard to work best in a certain market. One of the key facets of our system is that a GlobalG.A.P IFA certificate from Kenya is just as strenuous and rigorous as one from Kansas. But the NIGLs, not trying to change the control points, but trying to optimize the interpretation guideline, are used in many markets, including the USA. So when the harmonized was completed, we decided to align with the harmonized checklist as a common language, if you will. So what you have basically on the left in the dark green bar is IFA with the general regulations governance framework, and then it has the control points. On the far left in the light green, you have PSS. As you can see by looking at the details at the lower left, IFA has all 5 criteria. PSS just has the first 2. And via the harmonized, they're aligned. That is to say, if you take the harmonized checklist, and that includes the entire pre-farm gate checklist and a fair portion of the post-farm gate, if you take that and add our governance framework, and then what we call the riders, or additional GlobalG.A.P points, it's 12 additional food safety and 8 additional traceability points. When you add all that together, you do have congruency and equivalency. So this is the basic approach to the harmonization in the U.S., and I'll show you a checklist later which shows that a bit better. This is a testimonial. We have many, but this is a particular case. This is Dave Sargent, a major supplier to Walmart. He's a really amazing man that was injured as a paratrooper in the 50s during the Korean War, and he had literally not been on an airplane in 48 years. And he was so impressed with our standards that he got on an airplane in Arkansas for the first time in almost half a century, and flew last fall to our summit meeting in Spain, in Madrid, and gave our opening speech. So this is just a little quote from Dave Sargent. He's a great GlobalG.A.P supporter and a real hero. If you'd like to learn more about this, I encourage you to take some time to visit our website. We have the video of this presentation online, as well as some more photos and a full transcript of this speech. We'll move into some of the requirements now, and I will ask David to join me in this session.
Thanks, John.
This is some screenshots of our actual documents, so you can see what they look like beyond all the descriptions we've made. So these are just the cover pages. The general rules on the left is part 1. As I mentioned, our governance is formed by the introduction in parts 1, 2, and 3. The intro and part 1 are generalized. GlobalG.A.P General Regulations, or GR as we call it, part 2, is specific to our option 2 producer group system. And then part 3 covers our accreditation body and certification body rules. And then the major picture you have here is a shot from our control points for IFA crops, fruit, and veg. This is a look at the actual interior. The left picture shows the table of contents, and the right shows a shot of the actual CPCC. So what you have here basically on the far left column is the reference number, which matches the corresponding section in the list. It has the control point, which is the official rule. It has the compliance criteria, and then it has the level. So in the GlobalG.A.P system, we have a system whereby to achieve certification, a producer has to be in compliance 100% with major musts, which are the most important control points, and 95% with minor musts. There are also a third category which are recommended. So this is the basic layout, for those of you who have seen it will recognize, of our document. This is the CPCC. The checklist would simply have another column on the right where the actual field staff, auditors, inspectors can enter their commentaries by hand and click on a yes or no. The NIGL has additional columns to the right further. So that's where the harmonization alignment takes place. So if you will, you'd have the GlobalG.A.P reference numbers and control points, compliance, and level. And then with the NIGL layout, you would then have the corresponding compliance and criteria from the harmonized where they overlap with the matching harmonized reference number. This is a picture of one of our technical directors in a field in Europe holding up our approximately 2-inch thick IFA book. If you print the entire thing, which we don't do much anymore with environmental concerns, it's quite a whopper. So that's Friedrich from our European office. So here's some overall requirements which I'd like David to run through.
Great. So we're going to go a little bit deeper into GlobalG.A.P requirements, and I will summarize some during some of the slides because there's some diagrams that are more helpful in understanding, especially when we talk about option 2. So GlobalG.A.P requires documented risk assessments that address risk management policies and standard operating procedures. So the risk assessment is the foundation of the food safety compliance system in GlobalG.A.P. And there's also additional elements of farm field management that are assessed. It's a requirement that there is an initial assessment by the operation, an internal assessment before the inspection, and then before the inspection, the GlobalG.A.P inspection can happen. I'm using inspection, that's option 1, but before the assessment can happen, the operation needs to be registered in the GlobalG.A.P database and complete a registration form with the certifying body. Records are reviewed for the 3 months prior to the inspection or from the date of registration, whichever is longer. In GlobalG.A.P, the producer is defined as the person, individual, or business entity legally responsible for production and sale of the products covered by the scope. And producers cannot receive certification for the production of products that are not produced by them. Now, GlobalG.A.P fruit and vegetable certification covers fruit and vegetables used for fresh, cooked, or processed consumption by humans. Vegetables used solely for medicinal or aromatic purposes cannot be certified. Now, There's other crops, subscopes that are offered, including combinable crops, which is commonly referred to as row crops or grains in the United States, and SCS certifies to that. But there's also checklists for subscopes for coffee, tea, flowers, and ornamentals.
David, I'd just like to mention one point, if you wouldn't mind going back briefly.
Sure.
What he has here covers it very well, but there's just one more point I want to mention regarding this third paragraph, and that is that we do not cover wild-grown crops. So if a farmer, for example, raises mushrooms, that would be covered, but wild-caught mushrooms or wild-caught berries, fruits, etc., could not be certified, simply because you can't control all the factors. Thank you, David.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. I will now go into the GlobalG.A.P certification options. As I said before, the full requirements for option 2 are going to be up in a couple of times, and I will not cover all of them because we have some repeat information. There are a number of certification options. Option 1 is for single producers with, sorry about the interruption, this is David again, GlobalG.A.P Scheme Manager for SCS. I was going over certification options. Our cord got unplugged by accident, sorry about that. So option 1 is for single producers or legal entities with multiple sites but without QMS. There's one legal entity that holds the certificate. It's for producers with one site or multiple production sites. They can have both certified and non-certified production management units, and there's a great resource on the GlobalG.A.P North America through GlobalG.A.P on parallel production, parallel ownership. In option 1, annual internal assessments are required as well as external assessments by the certifying body. In option 2, producer groups, there's mandatory internal quality management systems, and the QMS requires there to be 2 or more individuals dedicated to the implementation of option 2, and the group holds the certificate, not the individual producers. So producer groups and option 1 multi-site with QMS require at least 2 staff, the QMS auditor and an inspector. It requires annual internal inspections for each member site, as well as assessment of the QMS, and then external assessment of the QMS and inspection of the square root of member sites, plus the unannounced inspections. And we have a diagram that will better show you the requirements for unannounced. Now in option 1 without QMS, in the first year, there needs to be a self-assessment to all registered sites for all of the crops that are being registered, and then externally there's an announced inspection for all of the sites. In years after initial certification, there needs to be a self-assessment, there needs to be an external assessment by the certification body, and then of all of the certified operations, 10% of them received unannounced inspections. In option 2, in the initial year, there's an internal QMS audit and internal inspection of each producer by the internal inspectors. And then in subsequent evaluations, there is the same. Internal QMS audits and then internal inspections. For option 2 and option 2 and option 1 multi-site with QMS, the external evaluation requirements in the first year are the announced QMS audit, the announced inspection of the square root, and then the sub of 50% of the square root of the producers. And then subsequent visits, actually, I'll move forward to the next slide to show you in a diagram. So initially, there's the internal QMS, and there's the internal audit of all of the members. Then there's the initial assessment by the certification body, which is the QMS audit, and then inspection of the square root of the members. Then certification can be granted. And then within that certification cycle, the certification body comes back and does an unannounced inspection on half of the square root of the group members, or the sites, or the group members, sorry. And then in subsequent years, there's the announced QMS audit. Well, there's always the internal QMS audit and the audit of all the members by the internal inspectors, and then the CB does the QMS audit, and then the square root of the members. So in some cases, it's half of the square root of the members because the unannounced can count toward that sample, and then there's recertification. To go over this a little bit more, the option 2 concept is a little difficult to understand. You can see in the circle here, we have the internal audits by the QMS. The QMS is in gold there. And the internal inspectors are inspecting all of the sites. And then the CB off to the side is conducting the external audit of the QMS, and then external inspections of at least the square root of that group. Now, in GlobalG.A.P. option 1, individual certification, this is the most popular option in the United States and is accepted by major retailers in the United States and accepted globally. So it serves folks in the U.S. who are exporting. Now, one certificate is granted for a legal entity, and the SCS structure, and generally the structure is the charges are based on the time required to conduct the audit. So I'll talk a little bit about sites. So I've been mentioning multiple sites. So there's a picture here, and there's internally SCS has to determine whether what a multi-site is and how it's coordinated. And generally, we define it as a portion of the operation that is physically separate and operates basically or operates on its own. And so that type of operation, if it's a distance away, would require another day of auditing, and we would would be what the fee is based on, not contiguous farms. So you can see right here, there are, in the map, there are 3 sites, and my understanding of this operation is that there's one pesticide shed for all of these. All the equipment is used for these 3 sites, and so this would be considered one site that can be assessed in one assessment. Now, in option 2, there's a requirement for a quality management system that maintains certification and certification requirements, so conducts the internal inspections and audits of the QMS. They must have an in-house inspector, which can be an employee, an in-house auditor to perform the QMS audit and to review the inspection reports that are provided by the inspectors. Perform inspections annually for all grower group members, and SCS SCS training can assist in helping you train your team on standard operating procedures and QMS policies. Now, the staff requirement for producer groups are that there's a person or team responsible for creating and implementing the quality management system and for reviewing farm inspections. The QMS auditor is required to have an agricultural degree or 2 years QMS experience, and then 2 years specific experience in fruit and vegetables for this fruit and vegetable scope. They need to receive training in HACCP, hygiene, and IPM, as well as a 16-hour QMS training. A consultant with the above qualification can be used as long as they can fulfill those requirements. Or a 2-person staff team can be put together as long as they have the appropriate credentials. So the internal inspector needs to have a degree in agriculture or 2 years experience in fruit and vegetable operations. They need to have training in HACCP, hygiene, and IPM. A consultant with the QMS or with the internal QMS inspector qualifications can be a consultant, or they can be a staff member. Now, if you're interested in option 2, I recommend you also take a look at the GlobalG.A.P. North America requirements for internal auditors and inspectors, which are accepted in the United States. Now, the benefits of option 2 include control of the relationship with growers, that the growers aren't working with the third-party certification party directly. There's no direct auditing fees to the grower. The fees are kind of gathered as a group generally to pay for the certification. And fees can be subtracted over time from payments to the grower in some cases where the grower group is a marketing entity. The cost to growers can be staggered to reflect acreage based on producer group calculations. There is flexibility to the grower. There's the timeline to submit corrective actions. There's also the inspections happen throughout the year for the internal assessments. There's also highly competent auditors and inspectors that are required and add value to the producer group system. And the risk assessments based on by the group are flexible and allow for the QMS to be suitable to the crop that's being audited.
David?
Yeah,
May I interject for a moment?
Go ahead.
Everyone, I'd like you to know it is a very complex system with the option 2. It has to be by nature to ensure the controls are in place. Producer group certification is a relatively new concept in the U.S. and Canadian market. We've been offering it here since 2010, but with the other standards in the market space, it doesn't really have a comparison. There's no producer group system in the Primus world at all. SQF has a limited approach, but it is extremely established internationally, and I wanted to assure you that it's a very, very stable and secure and rigorous system. Internationally, of our 135,000 certificates around the planet, 70% are in fact through the producer group approach. We have groups ranging in size from just a few farmers covering a few acres. I think we have one case in Europe of a producer group with 10,000 what we call smallholders or small farmers. So it really is very much an enabling technology. It's especially in the developing world, it's only through our producer groups in many cases that smallholders, small farmers can gather the resources collectively as far as technical staff and afford the fees to get certified and get their products to market on an international scale where the high quality certificates are expected. You're welcome to browse the newsletter section of our website. There's many truly amazing stories of what producer groups can do. They've changed entire communities in Africa especially, provided stable employment, assured much better protection for women and children worker rights, opened up new markets, given the communities the chance to afford better housing, schools, medical facilities, wells, everything you can think of. It's really a very powerful technology. It's an unknown concept here largely, but it's gained traction very quickly. We've had a very strong growth curve on option 2 in the last 12 months, and we're looking at multiple 100% growth over the course of 2014 to spring 2015. It's important to understand with this system, on a very superficial glance, every farm is not being audited every year within the group. So people think, well, it must be less rigorous, but that's absolutely the reverse of what is true. With the producer group approach, you've got an internal QMS, which, as David has explained, requires dedicated professional staff, and they essentially take over a lot of the policing duties within the group, but the CB is still very much involved. It audits the entire QMS every year. It audits a portion of the individual producers every year, and if they do well, it might do a smaller portion in the future, but there's always that going on, as well as the internal assessments, which are quite rigorous themselves. Another key factor to understand here, beyond the benefits we've discussed, is that it does provide a lot of logistical management, and it also provides some very real cost savings. The registration fees are the same, but the certificate fees can be substantially lower. And the other key point I'd like to mention, I'd be happy to answer any questions afterwards if you have some more issues, is that it's important to understand that because of its very nature, where the certificate is held by the entire group, beyond everything else we've discussed, there's a built-in mechanism whereby the producers within the group have to work together, and the internal policing of the QMS has to be very rigorous. Because with a producer group, a single bad producer or a single bad egg, if you will, can jeopardize the entire group certification. Now, in an extreme case, a producer group can decide to eject one of the individual farms, but there's a built-in incentive mechanism that they stay rigorous, keep compliant, and very much work together effectively as a team. So it's a very powerful system, and I think you'll see a lot more of it in the U.S. in the coming year and a half. It's by no means just useful for a bunch of individual small farms. We now have some major market-leading producers on the West Coast with up to 600-plus farms looking at this. It's very flexible, and the QMS system can be housed or personneled, if you will, at a shared common resource within a large producer network, for example, a marketing or sales company or a packed house cold storage facility, etc. And there are a lot of good resources for learning more on our website. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Jonathan. I did want to respond to one question here quickly. The question was, is there an option to do group auditing and have individual certificates? If there's individual certificates, there has to be the individuals being certified need to be registered. So there is not the efficiency of having of auditing the square root and then also the QMS, or the QMS and then the square root plus the unannounced. Now we're going into describing the actual inspection. It takes place after the certifying body has accepted the applicant's registration. The products need to be registered prior to certification. If the assessment occurs before harvest, not all control points can be assessed, and there needs to be a follow-up visit, or in some cases there can be other documentation that's provided, depending on the type of crop and harvest. A product that has not yet been harvested cannot be included in the certification. We already went over the requirement for records. And products harvested before the registration process cannot be certified. So only products that are where harvest is inspected and that are registered can be certified initially. The subsequent inspection can happen 8 months prior or 4 months after if the certificate has been extended. This ensures that the certification body can see not different times in the crop cycle, and also crops. If there's multiple crops, be able to see all the crops. Now, the required compliance, Jonathan already spoke about the 100% requirement for major musts and 95 for minor musts. In IFA, there's 95 major musts. In PSS, there's 68. In IFA, there's 117 minor musts, and then in PSS, there's 55. And you can see that PSS also has a significant number of less compliance criteria and control points for recommendations, and that is just because the health and safety portion and some of the other environmental control points and compliance criteria are not included, but all of the food safety benchmarked requirements are there in Produce Safety Standard. There was a question about the extension. The extension doesn't require a fee. It requires re-registration. So it requires that the registration form is submitted again with current information or affirmed, and that can happen. The day that the re-registration happens, there can be an extension, and there's a number of reasons why that would happen, and generally the extension happens well before it gets near the expiration of the certificate, because the registration people are re-registering on time or early. Okay, sorry. Okay, so this is just a quick list of the required risk assessments. There's the site risk assessment that needs to happen for every site. Worker health and safety risk assessment, which is not a part of Produce Safety Standard. There needs to be a hygiene risk assessment that covers the farming hygiene as well as harvest and pack house hygiene. If there's an on-site produce handling, the hygiene risk assessment has to specifically address those risks. There's a food defense risk assessment required. If organic fertilizers are used, that risk assessment is also required. An annual water risk assessment for irrigation and spray water, any water used on the crop, and then also maximum residue level exceedance risk assessment, which I believe SCS hasn't put on its site, but we have a guidance document and tool for our GlobalG.A.P clients and interested operations to assist with understanding that risk assessment. There's information in the control points and compliance criteria, but we're trying to make it a little bit more accessible. So SCS conducts audits, conducts initial on-site assessments during harvest. We write our reports, we follow up on non-compliances, and we certify operations. We also do unannounced audits on 10% of our certified operations, and we cannot do that for operations that have not been certified yet. So we do unannounced assessments on operations that have been certified at least a month and up to 6 months after the initial certification. So that doesn't always happen during the harvest season. It may happen while other activities are happening, such as planting, pruning, or spraying. Now, SCS provides multiple services, and we have another department, not my department, but we have full spectrum laboratory services. Our labs are ISO 17025 and ELAP accredited, and participate in 2 proficiency programs, IOAC and FAPAS. We have over 28 years in the business, and we do FDA, PAM, and catcher's methods. Our labs are accepted by the FDA, Canada, and Japan, and we have fast service. We have certification experts in auditing systems, auditor skills. We can bundle assessments to save you time and sometimes money. We have auditors around the world, and we can help you with your supply chain, as well as sustainability experts.
Okay, well, thank you very much, David, and thank you, Jonathan. This is Diane again, and I'd just like to, I'd just like to ask if anybody has any questions. We did run a little bit over time, but is there anybody with any other questions? I think we answered all of them as they came along. I am going to share this audio and the entire webinar with everyone, so we can send that out to you afterwards. Okay, well, then I just want to thank everyone for joining us, and we appreciate your interest. Please give us a call or an email, and you have Jonathan's email as well I put in there. So, Jonathan, thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you, David. Thank you, Rebecca, and thanks very much to all of you for attending.